And welcome to It's Not Your Fault with host Steve Shenk. I'm co-host Kim Power-Stilson, and today this is the first in the Achievement series, and we're talking about facing fears and planning and the problem. Now, of course, this show is based on Steve Shenk's book that's out soon, and the book is called It's Not Your Fault. You can find more about it on steveshenk.me, and you can also go to the website It's Not Your Fault and the Facebook site, It's Not Your Fault.
And it's not my fault.
And it's not my fault. I love this show, and I love the reaction this title of the show gets. When I tell people about your book and about what happens in this book, people love the title. They think it's fabulous, and I think a lot of people want it not to be their fault, so they love saying it.
Well, guilt is an interesting thing. It's something that people don't deal with very well. And one of the things, it's kind of interesting that as you're driving down the freeway and you have a policeman pull out behind you and drive along for a couple of miles, the first thing you do is check and see what's going on, because you just got what? You just got an instant piece of synthetic guilt. And You're looking around to see if it is your fault, because you don't want it to be your fault, but you're afraid it could be your fault. Otherwise, why is that guy back there? And we go through all of this self-flagellation, basically, beat ourselves to death, and then finally when we decide it's not really our fault, we look in that rear mirror and say, and we can't stand that jerk for pulling out and giving us that synthetic guilt. So we're dealing with guilt all the time. So that's why it's wonderful to give somebody it's not your fault.
It's not my fault. Well, the book is wonderful because it takes every man, which is called Michael in the book, through a journey where the guardian helps them kind of, the guardian appears, like you say, when Michael is ready. Every man is ready. And so it takes him through a journey of things that you should have known and that are so aha moments. They're so simple, but a lot of people don't. And I know, as I've read the book, I have loved coming across principles that I've applied to my life, and they work. And I have crazy teenagers and all kinds of things happening. So this show is about certain principles, and I know that fear is a big issue with a lot of people, and planning and sticking to goals is something that you talked about just a little bit, but I'd love to hear more.
Fear is an interesting animal. One thing that a fellow that was leading us during a difficult time in our country's history said, Roosevelt made the statement, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, but that's been attributed to Churchill and Gandhi and a whole bunch of other people.
I'm sure they all thought it.
Yeah, they all thought it. And I thought it a lot when I was really afraid. But have you ever noticed that when you have a problem, oddly enough, problems that we deal with actually create that nasty feeling in the pit of your stomach is a form of fear. And fear makes us angry, but the fact is that if we have a problem, we trouble over it. We're afraid of it. We're afraid of the confrontation. We're afraid we won't be able to figure out what to do.
It's true.
But have you ever noticed that after you mull over it, you pray about it, you meditate on it, and you get some counsel and you discuss it with people, all of a sudden you come up with a plan. And you say, okay, now what I'm going to do is this and this and this and this. And then you say, yeah, I think that'll work. All of a sudden, the fear disappears. Yeah. And a terrible example of this is the fact that when we talk about people that are on death row in prison, and they're appealing and they're appealing and they're terribly afraid, they're upset, they're worried, they're fighting. But once they've done their last appeal, once it's all over and they just know what the result is, they're no longer fearing the unknown. The decision's made. They have a plan. It's not the greatest plan, but oddly enough, in the majority of the cases, they just are at peace. That's a terrible example, and it feels awful, but oddly enough, it happens. And it can happen in a microcosm of our macrocosm. Now, this is the first of a two-part series. We're going to talk about dealing with fear, and then we're going to talk about success out of fear, because failure is the road to success, which we'll learn a little bit later on. But let's talk about the fear concept.
Can I throw in a quote, a favorite quote of mine by Mark Twain?
Sure.
I brought it today because I knew you were going to be talking about that, and I read this as a child. My father gave me a book of quotes by Mark Twain, and he says, "Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Except a creature be part coward, it is not a compliment to say it is brave."
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And the way we are, we fear the unknown. We fear failure. Many people fear success. But if we have a plan for how to accomplish whatever we need, then all of a sudden that fear disappears. If someone is afraid of failure, okay, a lot of people are out there. Some people are in sales. Some people are just trying to climb the ladder at work, the success ladder at work. Other people are trying to raise families, and they have problems. They're confronted with problems. Well, problems make us strong, but only because we overcome them. It's like lifting a weight. You strengthen a muscle by having resistance. Well, our resistance to what we consider success is what makes us strong enough to succeed. It's kind of an interesting situation, but we'll cover that in just a minute.
All right, you're listening to It's Not Your Fault. And of course, we're talking with Steve Shenk. He is a philosopher, author of the book It's Not Your Fault, food expert, and
philosopher.
and philanthropist. He's done some great work with causes, and it's such an honor to be speaking with you. We hope you'll stay tuned. And after this commercial break, we'll come back and talk more about the Achievement Series first part, which is fear.
Folks, have you ever realized that freedom is spelled F-O-O-D, food? After air and water, food is our greatest dependency. What if you got a supply of the best food on the planet? Food that tastes better, is better for you, is safer, is less expensive, stores for a long time, stores in very little space, and is so fast and easy to prepare that a 10-year-old can present you with a gourmet meal in 20 minutes. How will it feel to be eating the most perfect food ever created and also have a food savings account for when all of the gold you can save won't buy a single loaf of bread? I'm Steve Shenk, the creator of the superfood at eFoods Direct. Try it yourself. You can get 6 free meals, only pay shipping and handling. Go to efoodsdirect.com or call 800-409-5633. You can get 6 free meals.
Go ahead, try and keep a straight face.
And welcome back to It's Not Your Fault with Steve Shenk. I'm your co-host, Kim Power-Stilson, and Steve is making me laugh in the commercial break, which is kind of fun. But we're talking about a serious matter. Now, speaking of fun, Bill Cosby, the comedian Bill Cosby, you've heard of him.
I know who he is, yes.
Did you ever watch The Cosby Show on Friday nights?
No, but remember when he was talking to God?
Yes.
Foompa, foompa, foompa. He was talking to me. I'm that old.
No, you're not. Bill, I hope he's alive. I don't even know if he's alive still. Is he?
I think he is.
Okay, I think he is. Sorry, Bill. I'm sure you're watching. You're mad at me.
Yeah.
Well, he has a quote that
he did Fat Albert too.
He did Fat Albert.
Yeah.
Fat Albert was fabulous. Yeah. He has a quote.
Never mind. Go ahead.
But we digress. But Fat Albert was a good show.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, a cartoon.
Never watched it, but it was a good show.
Okay. But he can mimic the voice.
Fat Albert was obese, and we're against obesity.
That's right. And
Yeah.
that's what we're learning about.
By the food.
On your other shows, yeah,
There you
on
go.
the food.
Okay, go ahead.
So we're on the It's Not Your Fault show, and this, of course, is by author Steve Shenk, who's written a book that will be out soon, so you'll be able to find that on Facebook. It's Not Your Fault. You can find that with the apostrophe, and also steveshenk.me. So now we were talking about fear, and here's this quote by Bill Cosby that I thought was fabulous for the show. Decide that you want it more than you are afraid of it.
There you go.
Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about.
That's really, really great, and it's connected with what people have to do. One of the greatest, probably the greatest, at least in some of the statistics that I've seen, the greatest illness, if you can call it that, of American women is depression. People, the self-image issue, I'm not good enough, I need to get the approval of everybody around me. I want to be liked. I'm desperate to be liked. I'm desperate to be seen. I need identity. There was a period of time when people wore all sorts of weird clothing, great big
Not now,
boots.
still.
Yeah, well, yeah, boots that had soles that thick and heels that were higher, and the zoot suits and things like that. People are screaming to separate themselves from everybody else, and in so doing, they become just like everybody else. And it's just really kind of weird, like the kids that are pulling their pants down to their, whatever, and all walking around so that they can be different, and they all look the same, so they're different the same. So where's that taking us? What's happening is that people just need to be identified as themselves, and they have a fear of being lost and becoming zeros, becoming ciphers in the snow, as it were. And so,
sad.
Yeah, and that's why depression is a huge thing. People are feeling a sense of not accomplishing anything, not having anything, I didn't go to school, so I missed out on a college education because I got married and had kids, and all of the various things that people trouble themselves over, and they're living in the past. And we'll discover in another show that the past doesn't exist, but by people going over and thumping on their chests and feeling how bad they are and how miserable they are, they lose the ability to create forward and go forward in their lives and become who they could be. And they're absolutely magnificent, but they never realize it because they're lost in this quagmire, this whirlpool of just disgusting slime of their own creation. People can't have, you could punch me right in the mouth, and depending on how I decided to take it, it could affect me one way or the other. You could punch me in the mouth and say, "Hey, Steve, you're a heck of a guy." And oh, shoot, that hurt, but thank you. Or you could say, "You're a jerk," and whap me in the mouth, and I say, "Dude, she doesn't like me anymore." It's all me. Nothing to do with you. So let's talk about that.
And is it just women? Because you mentioned women. Is it women and men? Is it everyone that has this kind of image issue?
Yeah, women have all the problems. Men don't have it.
I thought so. We suffer greatly.
Men have it worse than women do.
Really?
But the problem with women is that they're at home. They a lot of times are raising the family. They're not out there doing what they imagine to be in the heat of the battle, like they imagine their husbands to be, while their husbands are out there saying, "Oh shoot, I'm in the battle, but I'm getting my butt kicked." And they don't feel good about themselves either. And self-image is a huge thing. That's what's causing a tremendous amount of the addiction. People are finding themselves at the end of a needle, at the bottom of a bottle, and all sorts of things. They have addictions to work. They have addictions to sex. They have addictions to just about everything you could possibly imagine. People don't have relationships with their wives, and so they get hooked on porn, looking at some little tutti frutti out there when they've got a wonderful woman that stands beside them and can be their eternal partner to go forth and conquer anything. But where does it all end? It comes down to how we feel about ourselves, and I got one solution for it. I got one solution for every fear that you possibly have.
Please.
Thank you. It's one word. It's called gratitude. Let's do a little experiment. Let's think about anger and gratitude at the same time. Go ahead and try and do that.
That's hard.
Okay? Think about arrogance and gratitude at the same time.
That's impossible.
Try and be depressed and think about gratitude at the same time.
Okay, that doesn't work either.
Okay? Think about failure and gratitude at the same time.
Wow, that doesn't work either. I'm surprised.
Anything that you're upset about, anything that you fear, if you will stop and go through a list of your gratitudes, you cannot. It's an interesting thing. There's a mirror technique that you and I've talked about, Kim. If someone is crying hysterically, they're just so upset that they're just weeping and wailing and crying. If you grab them by the shoulders and stick them in front of a mirror and make them look at themselves, they can't continue doing it. We can't see ourselves as less than what we are. You'll notice if someone feels bad about themselves or they're ashamed, they'll do this. I'm ashamed in front of you, so I can't look at you. Interesting thing. Have you ever noticed that many of the churches during Halloween times will not allow the children to come in with masks on? Interesting thought. Why is that?
Yeah, why is that?
Why do people go to masked balls and act differently than they would if their face was showing? Why is it that terrorists always wear masks? Think about it. It dehumanizes you, and if you can't see me as who I am, then I can act in any way, all sorts of amoral, immoral ways. I can shoot you right between the eyes without a second thought, but if you were looking at me and my face was showing so that you could see me as me, I couldn't do it. Terrorists automatically are trained never to make eye contact. If you identify with the person, if you look at them, look in their eyes, all of a sudden that communication, you become a person. If you're just a person that I don't look at, don't make eye contact, bam, you're done. No problem.
So then
if
that
you don't
advice?
know if you can't say who I am. Go ahead.
So if I'm in a terrorist situation, knock on wood, I would want to look in their eyes somehow?
Oh, absolutely. Try and catch their eyes, smile at them. Try and engage them in conversation. Just drive them absolutely nuts.
Well, it's like that horrible thing that happened at the Colorado movie theater for the Batman premiere, right? He had, was covered up, so that makes sense. And it was dark, so that makes complete sense.
There you go.
Terrible.
My daddy used to say the night is a friend to no man. People will do things at night under cover when they can't be identified. So what does it say about how you feel about yourself and how you're willing to act? When we talk about the mirror technique, we talk about terrorists, we talk about the fact that people will do things behind a mask that they would never do even if you're never going to see them again. If they know that you're a total stranger, they cannot do to you things that they would do if they were masked. So what's that say? What's important to us? What's the most important thing to us? Well, guess what? If we talk to ourselves when we're in the deepest of depression and most unhappy and most fearful and start listing all the gratitudes, people who are alive that we're grateful for, people who have gone beyond and then are dead that we are grateful for, the things that we have that we are grateful for, the things that we can do that we're grateful for the gifts. Everyone has gifts. But if you force yourself to think of the gifts that you have for which you are grateful, you see, so here's the interesting thing. If you will start out, we're going to talk later on about how to accomplish anything that you want to accomplish and become.
Part 2.
That's part 2.
Okay.
You can't have that. This is part 1. Got to wait till part 2 for that one. But right now, we're talking about part 1. If you will make a list of all the things that relate to that for which you're grateful, okay? I'm grateful that I'm 5 feet 10 3/4 inches high, because that's the perfect height for the American male. You didn't know that, did you? Okay, I am grateful for the fact that I can think and talk at the same time. I was raised in a German family. If you didn't think and talk at the same time, you didn't think. Talking, you always did. But never mind. That's another story. But if you make a list of gratitudes, the people, present, past, and also people for whom you are grateful, the great teachers. I'm grateful for Plato. I'm grateful for Shakespeare. I'm grateful for all of the people that have contributed to who I am. I'm grateful for my physical abilities. I have these hands for Steve Shenk are the most perfect hands that Steve Shenk could have. If one hand was crippled, these would be the most perfect hands. One being crippled, there's a value in that. I'm grateful for everything. You go down through the people, the possessions, everything you can think of that you're grateful for, and make a list of them. Then whenever you get down a little bit, go back to your list of gratitudes. And with regard to the subject that you're down about, you know, Mabel turned me down on the third date request, and I don't think she likes me. But I'm grateful for, and then go through and find all the gratitudes that affect the fact that Mabel turned you down for the third request for a date. Or, I'm grateful for my teenagers. That's a hard one. But the fact is they're intelligent. They love me when they don't consider me a jerk. But anyway, you go down through, and every time you run into a problem, every time you run into a fear, you start listing the gratitudes. And it is the most amazing, it's the most amazing antidote for fear, anger, worry, doubt, anxiety, and something that we're going to cover in our next show called uncreation, where we uncreate that which we wish for because we doubt that we can receive it. Doubt, depression. Take those things, and just like I can't think arrogance and gratitude at the same time. I can't think stupidity. I'm stupid, but I'm grateful. Can you? Can you think I'm lesser than who I am and be grateful for who I am at the same time? It can't happen. So if folks will just experiment between now and our next program, if you'll just experiment with the gratitudes, it will be absolutely phenomenal to you. Don't you dare go on and set any goals. Can't do that until program number 2, okay? You just deal with the gratitudes.
Now, how many would you write, or how long would you take?
I would make a list of about 10 categories of gratitudes.
Okay.
People, places, things, circumstances, our country, home. Make a list, and under each one of those categories, try and list 3 to 5 different things that you're grateful for, different people you're grateful for, and this type of thing. And don't limit yourself. Everything you can think of that you're grateful for. And as you go through listing your gratitudes for 1 week's time, once a day, you will discover others that you'll add to it. Make the list as long as you can. Because out there someplace in the future, there is something that particular gratitude will help you with.
Really?
So that when you run into that fear you never ran into before, you can say, wait a minute, I've never run into that one before, but you'll go back, and oddly enough, you'll find a miracle. The miracle is that you will find several of the gratitudes that you've already been reciting to yourself that apply to that, and you won't be able to think that fear and these gratitudes at the same time. It's a marvelous, marvelous revelation to people. And you'll find that this particular key, this one key, is the difference between every single motivational, self-help, goal-setting system that you've ever seen. It's never been placed in there to solve the one problem. You see, what you'll find in our next show, here's a little hint. When we set a goal, that's the creation. When we doubt that we can do it, that's the uncreation. What gratitude will do is completely eliminate all of the uncreation. And here's a simple fact. Those who are successful simply create just a little bit more then they uncreate. But what if you could eliminate all of the doubt, all of the fear, all of the uncreation with every goal that you set? If you could do that, and successful people only create just a little bit more than they uncreate, and you could eliminate virtually all of the uncreation in your life, what will you do? Interesting. You know, it's absolutely remarkable what a human being can accomplish. It's phenomenal what an individual can achieve. But what people will do is often disappointing. But with that little key, the key of this particular program, that's number 1 in a series of 2, gratitude is the key ultimately to everything that you want to accomplish, all that you want to be, and the magnificence of who you are. That's all I got.
I'm going to stay tuned in for sure. Steve, that was marvelous, and I think a lot of people could relate to that. So grab a fresh piece of paper, get a notebook, and try this every day. List your gratitudes, people, places, things, etc. Don't limit yourself. Write them down. Eleanor Roosevelt said this: you gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You're able to say to yourself, I have lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. So even if this is going to be hard to write the gratitudes down, do it. Look it in the face and do it.
There you go. Heck of a deal.
Okay, you can go to Facebook and find It's Not Your Fault and steveshenk.me for the next show. Again, this is part 2 coming. This is part 1. Part 2 of the Achievement Series by Steve Shenk is coming. So you can find us online and please come back and join us for that show.
Yeah. And if you raise your hand for this show for number 1, you can raise your hand for number 2 on the next one.